So in this segment, we're going to be talking about a man who refuses to let himself just fade away from the news and just quietly cash checks in from the House of Lords, which is the Iceman himself, Mr. Frost. So beware, Remainers are regrouping, and actually they'd be called Rejoiners. Frost, mate, get it right. And also, I don't really think they are, to be honest. It's pretty much as fractured as it's ever been. So the Brexit battle seems long over, which, you guys got Brexit done in 2019, so it should be over. The Titanic debates, which is what these people live for because they're sad, after the referendum in which both Remainers and Brexiteers played to sweep the board, seemingly ended. I mean, that's not true. Even if Remainers won in 2016, you guys still would have been like crying about it, so I don't want to hear that. Nearly a near total victory for the advocates of a real Brexit. What is a real Brexit? Was it leaving the EU single market and customs union? Because you guys didn't say we would do that. So what is a real Brexit? It doesn't make sense. With a supreme effort, Britain took itself free of the European Union, became a full democracy again. That's just a massive lie. Are you saying France isn't a full democracy? Are you stupid? Also, the other point about the near total victory, Boris Johnson said there will be no non-tariff barriers for goods moving between Great Britain and France. That didn't happen. That was a lie. So what is the real Brexit then? Is it WTO rules? Because that's what you guys said as well at one point. Was that the real Brexit? I genuinely don't know. The grand new free trade deal we had, which we had been told would take 10 years to agree, was put in place in 10 months. Okay, that's fair enough. It's a bare bones trade deal. So the argument will take 10 years is not the best argument, but to get a good trade deal, they do take around 10 years. Yeah, 7. I think it's between 5 and 10 years. And the behaviour of the EU 21 from subverting the Northern Ireland Protocol, I mean, that's not true, is it? If it was subverting it, you would be able to trigger Article 16, go to arbitration and win. You haven't done that, though, have you? All you've done is take unilateral action, lie, and just cause constant problems. To rubbishing the AstraZeneca vaccine, which is proper jokes, because the AstraZeneca vaccine, I think they didn't give it to anyone below the age of 35 in the UK because of potential health risks. So the EU are right to have doubts about the AstraZeneca vaccine, because even the UK has doubts about the AstraZeneca vaccine. So what the hell? Again, what are you talking about, dog? To the point where a lot of younger people are given the Pfizer ones or the Moderna ones. This guy, man. This is why reading Telegraph articles just gives me a headache. But to be fair, at least this man hasn't been able to bring the S-tier propaganda, the real stuff I love. He goes, and yet on the fringes of politics, the unreconciled Remainers are regrouping. The Brexit shambles hashtag is seen again on Twitter. And who cares about Twitter? Twitter isn't real life. You learned that lesson. People on the left wing learned that lesson the hard way in 2019, where we got absolutely curb stomped by the Tories. Twitter's not real life, man. They can tweet. They can get this to #1 trending. No one cares. Andrew Adonis, you should put Lord Adonis, really. European movement says Brexit has failed, which is true. We were lied to. Also true. It's time to rethink. That's a fine statement, isn't it? There's nothing wrong with that. The Treasury saying that the Brexit impact on growth is tangible, which is true. Starmer can see that getting too close to any of these people will make him about as welcome in the Red War as Vladimir Putin is downtown Kyiv, which is such a stupid argument, because if Starmer did make these arguments and went to the Red War, he would probably get moaned at or shouted at. If Vladimir Putin walked downtown in Kyiv, he'd get lynched. They would kill him on the spot, or they would hang him. He would get executed. Nevertheless, he can't ignore his supporters, and therefore he has to say that a poorly thought through Brexit is holding Britain back, which is absolutely the case. Exports are down dramatically to the EU. There was a massive traffic backlog in Dover, which wasn't just because of Brexit, but it played a large part in it, or a decent part in it. So again, what are you talking about, dog? Remainer Jacobitism, is that a dig at Jacobin? I don't know. Remainer Jacobitism in support of von der Leyen as the Queen over the water is just too unpopular. I mean, no one really believed that. Remainers don't really talk about von der Leyen that much. I don't know how popular she is. I genuinely don't know a lot about her. Rejoiners don't really tweet about her that much. No one's saying she's the Queen over water. What are you talking about, honestly? This guy just comes up with absolute nonsense. Instead, their aim is to keep us aligned with the EU, which is not a bad thing considering they're our largest single trading partner. The EU is. Often using the Northern Ireland Protocol as a weapon. No, the only person who used the Northern Ireland Protocol as a weapon is you, dog. They know that if the UK doesn't diverge much from EU law, it'd be much easier to take us back in later if events work in their favour, which is true. But the main reason I don't want divergence is I don't want lower standards than what we had in years gone by. I don't want to, eat hormone beef and all this nonsense where I don't know much about it. Yes, I'm a guy who eats junk food. Absolutely, I do. But, the EU having the highest standards around, that's where I want to be a part of, not some bargain basement drop to the bottom. That's, you want to be a part of the top team, not the bargain basement team. To this, they have to get it established in the public mind that Brexit is already failing. And again, people like him can't really point to Brexit successes. All they do is lie, which is something I'll talk about in a moment. But the simple fact is Brexit is failing. Exports are down. People are losing money. The service industry, that they've taken out I think millions or billions out of the UK in terms of like money to trade with. After 25, we're going to see more of the impacts from the EU not using UK clearinghouses, amongst other things. We are seeing it. It's a slower puncture than I thought, but we are seeing the damage. Their picture of Britain is not the one the rest of the world is seeing, live with COVID successfully. COVID rates are going very high now, or getting high. I think they dipped recently, but it's not looking good. In the summer months it will dip, but in the winter it will come back. The NHS are already warning over an Easter crisis. So living with COVID, yes. Living with it successfully, no. Dying with COVID successfully, it's closer to that really. Leading on Ukraine, and again, we are leading when it comes to weapon exports. When it comes to helping Ukrainian refugees, which are a byproduct of war, we've done absolutely very little compared to EU member states. So you can make an argument in one case, but I can argue otherwise in other cases. And for me, helping refugees is one of the most important things. Coming out of the economic downturn faster than Germany. It's okay, I think we got out of the lockdowns quicker than Germany, so it would make sense. So again, a stupid argument. Because they use any argument that comes to hand. Last autumn it was HGV drivers, which was true. We had massive problems with HGV drivers and the threat to Christmas turkeys. We had to import more turkeys because of the end of freedom of movement and a lack of skilled butchers. So again, Frost, can you please stop lying? Please. This month, the story is the latest trade figures and delays at Dover, the latter caused in fact by the withdrawal of P&O ships, which, yes, P&O played a large part in it from what I've spoken to people in the Road Haulage Association, but, the GVMS system being down has also played a part in it. Operation Brock has also played a part in it. A chart has been circulating showing that our trade performance has been stagnating since Brexit, which again is no surprise when we're struggling to get goods into the UK that would be used for component goods that will go into other things like cars and airplanes, etc. So it's not hard to figure out why we're struggling. In reality, it's almost impossible to draw any firm conclusions from the trade figures amid the noise of recovery from the pandemic. So we can use the quarterly GDP figures and other things, right? But we're not allowed to look at trade figures. Why is that, Frost? Why can't we look at both, big man? Honestly, what a joke this guy is. To get a sense of the orders of magnitude, good exports to the EU in the last 3 months of 2018, the last relatively normal year, I'd argue 2019 for the West was a normal year, was 43.2 billion. In the last 3 months of 2021, that figure was 42.4 billion, a fall of 2%. Exports to the rest of the world over the same period grew by just 4%. Again, our exports to the rest of the world were, I think, lower than to the EU, so that's a problem. Let's not forget that trade figure that he cited is still lower. We've gone away from the global trend, which is global trade has gone up, ours has dipped. So, what argument is this guy going to make? You can't argue that. It's just a joke, honestly. It's ridiculous. Maybe the short-run Brexit effect is 5 to 6%, with every chance of catching up further as traders continue to get used to the new arrangements. But the thing is, traders are also wondering, is it worth still trading with the EU given all the red tape that's in the way because of the Tories? They're questioning it. So trade might not go back to normal, anywhere near normal because of that, because they are questioning, is it worth it? If it's not viable for their business, or if it's barely viable, they're not going to bother doing it. Hardly the catastrophe many claiming. I mean, again, trade figures are lower, and I think they're going to stay low compared to the rest of the world, which is a huge problem for us. And let's not forget, I'm not going to pull out the map again, but the UK is very far away from the rest of the world compared to how far we are from the EU. In any case, what matters is not trade. What? That's what you guys said, we can increase trade. Trade was important to you guys. Now, because trade's not doing so well, it's not important. But economic growth, here Remainers point to this month's OBR assessment that GDP will be 4% lower in 2030 than it would be in otherwise. This, of course, is not a fact but a prediction. Yeah, if it's in the future, it's a prediction, sure. though the distinction seems lost on many. Moreover, it is a prediction based on an assumption, which is technically what I think predictions are made on. You're assuming things. That higher trade causes higher productivity, which is true. You know, higher trade, you make more stuff, it can lead to higher productivity. But he says it's just as plausibly the other way around. The link between trade and productivity growth found in many analysis of Brexit is often based on evidence of emerging markets or ex-communist economies where increased trade went with huge improvements in the way the country was run more broadly, which makes sense because they're starting from a lower point. Because it doesn't hold up like anything in advanced economies. Indeed, the UK's own trade openness has grown since the financial crash, but productivity has not. I mean, again, I don't know much about productivity numbers. Maybe we'll give him that. I don't know. It's a point I can't debunk because I don't know how to fully figure that stuff out. Of course, no sensible person would deny that leaving the single market and customs union has some effect on trade in the short term, except that's not what you guys argued, was it? You guys argued there would be no downsides, considerable upsides. So you're admitting to us facing problems? Because I've always been clear about this. When before the referendum did you say this? That's what I want to know. Before the Tories won the 2019 election, did you say this? That's what I want to know. The Chancellor Sunak repeated this last week, and again, that's not something he mentioned during the referendum or before the election. I don't remember him saying any of this. This is why it's so important we get on with our own domestic reforms and improve productivity and growth. All the levers are now in our hands, so when it doesn't happen, we're going to be able to blame you guys, right? That's what you're admitting to in that paragraph. This is, and this really must be the government's priority in the upcoming Queen's speech, deregulation and growth, okay? Sir Ivan Rogers, another voice from the past, this week said that history did not end with Frost's trade and cooperation agreement. He's right, most of us welcome the cooperative approach we have taken with the EU over Ukraine, which is fine. We have cooperated with them. We could have been in the room more with other EU leaders to talk about the situation, but we chose not to be. He goes, our treaty framework can indeed be developed further in areas such as cooperation between our regulators, youth mobility, or visa facilitation for our artists. He goes, this is where again he lies, and it's easy to debunk him on this. We all have already. Indeed, we sought some of these in 2020, but were rebuffed or only offered them on unacceptable terms. The EU offered visa-free access for musicians, and I think for their equipment and things like that, they weren't, they could move freely with their stuff because it's very expensive. And Frost said no. So visa-free access was offered around the time 2019. I think that around the time things were negotiated, Frost said no, and then Frost came back, more recently and said, "Oh, that was a mistake. The only one who made the mistake was you, then, pal. You don't make sense." Youth mobility. You got rid of freedom of movement, so great. Cooperation between our regulators. I mean, why would they? They don't really need to cooperate with us. We have to set up our own regulations. We haven't even got our own safety certificate mark thing up yet. So again, there is cooperation between the regulators, but there will never be that kind of alignment. There'll never be those kind of immediate agreements of, oh yeah, your stuff's fine, come through, especially when the UKCA mark is operational. We should always be ready to talk about these things. For the EU, the question that will then need answering is, if the terms can be improved, why is the Northern Ireland Protocol so sacrosanct? It's because they don't want, third country goods going into the EU without them being checked. What? They don't want a hard border on the island of Ireland. Yes, it can be improved. If we went for a dynamic alignment deal, things would be improved. So again, what are you talking about, my guy? He doesn't make any sense. The Northern Ireland Protocol can be improved upon, but the UK has to give something in terms of alignment, but we choose not to. So we have the problems we have. Our destiny is our hands, and it's up to us to do the right thing, which is true. So do something then. It says the EU had between 1973 and 2020 to show us UK membership was a good idea. 47 years. By that measure, by that standard, I agree. We must revisit this in 2067 now. Lord Frost is 57 years old. By the time by the time we get to 2067, he'll be dead, most likely. I mean, I'll be an old man by then. I'll be older than Frost is now. So that's pretty scary. But I think we should measure it in 5 years or in 10 years. Every few years we should check. What's the trends for the EU? What are the trends for the rest of the world? And what are our trends? Are they different? Why are they different? because eventually, in a year, other economies have gone back to pre-pandemic levels, and depending on how the next year or two goes, how bad COVID is, it might be the case that we can go back to pre-pandemic levels on a whole. We won't have to worry about this thing so much. At least I hope so. So that's where we should really start measuring. What are the differences between the economies, and why is that? Why is the UK an outlier right now when it comes to trade and things like that? And for him to argue the Germany point about our growth being higher than Germany, if you look at the GDP figures from 2020 and 2021, right, the UK's growth is very high because we've fallen so much. If you look at it, we've actually had the highest drop in GDP. The three outliers are China and Turkey. You can see even India's GDP dropped dramatically and then shot back up sort of last year, as we went through the kind of, more countries kind of opened up. We had the vaccines last year, which really helped out, etc. And we got past the initial shocks of the pandemic. And if you look at it again, 2019 growth is very low in these countries, which makes sense because the drop off, it's the drop off that gives you the big jump the next year. If you look at the UK, we had a huge drop off, almost minus 10%, and then we shot back up to around, I'm going to say about 6 to 7%. If you look at Germany down here, right, they had a drop off around 4%, and they've shot back up by around 3% of GDP. Or maybe 2.5% because graphs are confusing. But point being is that, of course, we're going to have a higher growth than Germany if we've gotten out of the lockdowns earlier and we had a bigger gap to climb. It makes sense. So again, these dudes, they make sense when they make these comparisons. We got out of lockdowns earlier. We had a bigger drop off in GDP. When they talk about the highest growing economy in the G7 and all this other stuff, right? It's because we had the biggest drop off. That's the fundamental issue. We dropped off the most, so we had the most to climb. It's not hard to figure out, and it's frustrating when people, especially when they do interviews and journalists don't point this out. It's because we had the most amount of minus growth or the biggest decline in our economy. That's why it's jumped up so much. And for Frost to kind of fearmonger about Remainers or rejoiners, it's just a joke, to be honest. Because I don't see much in terms of regrouping. It's probably the same it's been in years gone by, maybe less. I mean, the FBPE crowd still exists, but that's about it. The media aren't really clamouring for us to rejoin the EU or, join the single market or customs union. So this guy's writing this article is pure culture war because that's the only world they live in. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.